Hello boys and girls, Chris here, and we are going to talk about Lightroom. Even though most of my discussions lately have been about mobile photography, we're going to try to coordinate the two between the new advances, some of the new advances in Lightroom, and even shooting mobilely. So let's jump right in here. We're going to specifically talk about HDR in Lightroom now, the emerging capabilities of Lightroom. So what I have up on the screen here is a collection of raw files. As you can see, NEFs. There's three here. I'm going to select these three NEFs. I want to make sure I'm in my work in progress folder. Yep. Select all three of those. Under the photo menu, I come down and I go to Photo Merge HDR. It's going to bring up a separate window where it's going to merge everything together. And it's going to create a separate raw file. So everything we do from this point on is going to be non-destructive, which is an advantage, a huge advantage when it comes to processing HDR images. And you don't get as much of that surreal look. You have more, I think, more control subtly over the variations in this image, especially if you're familiar with the environment of Lightroom. It leaves everything else, everything you do in the same basket, and it leaves you with the same controls that you're familiar with. Now, this is the dialog box that you're presented with, and you don't have many functions here. Auto align, auto tone. Auto tone refers to allowing Lightroom to determine what it thinks the tone should be. So not something I normally select. When the deghosting, you'll notice here for low, medium, and high, if you want to show the deghosting in the overlay, it shows the areas that are moving. Some of the clouds in the water are moving, and obviously if I want a lower priority put in the deghosting, it's going to build that preview and reduce the areas in red that it's going to be deghosting. And if I go to high, it would increase. So depending on what you're shooting would depend on what you'd like to select. But I'm going to select merge and allow this to merge. And you're going to see this pop up here as a DNG, just similar to what I had here that I produced here. I'm producing it from three NEFs, which are raw Nikon files. So here we have a DNG. This is the DNG that I produced. So now we can right click on this, go to show it in Finder, and look at how large this picture, this image is. It's 107 megabytes, 108 megabytes basically. So it did increase file size quite dramatically. So let's go to develop module, and we can process this as we would normally here. So I go through and I'll change the exposure. I might bring the exposure down a little bit, up the shadows and highlights a little bit, protect my whites, and open up the blacks a little bit, apply a little clarity and saturation. Now I've been going for black and white look mostly. I'll add a little contrast to my tone curve. So you can see I'm getting all the controls I'm very familiar with in Lightroom. So I can go through and I can tweak this accordingly. I can see what areas that I'm affecting in the image. I can apply a little bit of sharpening. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with these functions because these are all things that I'm sure that most of you are familiar with. Get the radial tool here, and I'll slap our radial in this area here. I'll go with a little bit of reverse on this, darkening that. Go back to my basic tab, and I'll lighten everything now. Brighten everything up. So you can see that I can get a pretty decent result This is the result I had before of the image as this loads this file up. But what I wanted to speak to you about is, will this do this with loading in JPEGs from your iPhone? And here I shot, as we'll see in my library module, 3 JPEGs, JPEG, 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 and the DNG that it produced. So let me just eliminate that. So I'm going to select these 3 JPEGs, and I'm going to go Photo, Photo Merge, HDR. And it's going to go through and it's going to create a larger, nearly a 50 megabyte picture based on these 3 iPhone pictures that I shot with an HDR effects program with my iPhone, handheld, out the front door of our apartment here in Florida. So you can see that, you know, some of the things that were moving, low priority. I hit merge. It's going to create again a DNG from these 3 iPhone pictures. So I end up with a simulated raw picture because the contents really aren't raw and their origin, they're derived from 3 JPEGs, but it yields a DNG, which I can see here, and I will look at it in the Finder, and we'll see that it's 44 meg, so quite a bit larger than the 3 megabytes or so that these pictures have. And I've got all the functions available to me in my develop module. I bring the exposure back, bring the highlights down, open up the shadows, whites, get a little bit of clarity in there, switch to black and white, and I can make modifications here just like I would normally with non-destructive editing here, right here in Lightroom. But these pictures really started off with my iPhone. So I'm going to apply a little sharpening, masking, noise reduction, and there you have it. So basically, put that at the very end. These 3 pictures, these 3 JPEGs yielded this DNG in black and white. You don't have to go in black and white if you don't want to. And from here you can take it anywhere you want. You can start out, you can go into Photoshop, you can take it Silver Effects, wherever you like to go with the image. But the fact of the matter is we took 3 pictures with an HDR program in from my iPhone, transferred it to the computer, and brought it into Lightroom and did an HDR merge and get a much more defined area. Now you'll notice that, you know, when I click on this image, one thing I want to point out in the develop module is that normally you have about 4 stops of brightness in the exposure, but here, if you look at the exposure over here on the right, I can go down 10. So I have much more detail and longevity and dynamic range to play with here in the picture. And it's combining the powers of your phone, camera phone, and new functions in Lightroom now. I want to also mention that the new version of Lightroom can be downloaded if you're a CC member. Just update your software. And also, I'll be doing a future movie on the powers of panoramics, also in the photo merge portion of Lightroom.